It's good to be with you this morning. I have been with you before. I told this to first service. I'm kind of like a stray dog. Show me a little attention, and I just keep coming back. All right? And so it's good to be back with you this morning. Yes, my name is Toney. I live about an hour north of here in Bothell. It's an hour on Sunday mornings. It's about 3 hours all the rest of the time during the week. Okay, but it was about an hour this morning driving down from Bothell. It's good to be with you. I am by myself this morning. I don't have any of my family with me, and to prove that there are people who actually love me, I brought a picture. This is my family. That's my wife, Stacy, standing next to me. We've been married for 33 years, and yeah, absolutely, she's put up with me that long, so that deserves some cheers. And so she is currently serving this morning at our church. She works as the connections coordinator at a church called North Shore Church in Kirkland, and that's where she is this morning. And then in front of me is my son Tanner and his wife Delaney, there with the red hair, and they live in Japan. My son Tanner is a church planter, and he started a church in Sapporo, Japan, and that's where they live with their family. We just went and visited them a couple of weeks ago. It's pretty good. And then in the front, the person who's always in charge of the pictures is my daughter Haley. And Haley is not with us this morning because she works for a church in Ventura, California called Mission Church. She's their children's director. And so that's my family, and that's who claims me. And so it's good to be with you guys this morning and share a little bit about who they are. I am a pastor, actually. I've been a pastor for a little more than 30 years. I'm not currently serving a local congregation because I'm the executive director of Evergreen Network. Evergreen is the organization actually that helped this church get started some 60 years ago. And so we've been around a little while. Evergreen Church Planting Network, that's what we do. We gather together partners to establish healthy, multiplying churches throughout the Pacific Northwest. And I love to get to do what I do. For us, we define the Northwest as Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Alaska, and British Columbia. Now, I'm kind of new to Evergreen Network. I became the executive director in 2022 after moving here from Pennsylvania, so a little further than an hour north, okay? During the previous 27 years of ministry, I started and led churches in New England and Pennsylvania. I worked at the last church in Pennsylvania that I helped to establish for 17 years before I went to work for a church planting organization in the northeast part of the United States before finding my way to Seattle. And I am new to the Pacific Northwest, but I am not new to establishing new churches. I've been at it for about 30 years. Evergreen is not new to establishing new churches either. Again, it's been around for 64 years. Back in 1961, as Seattle was erecting the Space Needle in preparation for the World's Fair, a group of people came together to form a partnership to share the love of Jesus through planting churches patterned after the New Testament. What is now Evergreen was born. Back in those days, we were known as the Christian Evangelistic Association. So we did a name change. And over the last 64 years, 76 churches have been established in the Pacific Northwest, and that's a pretty good deal, including 4 churches that started last month. These 4 churches all started last month. Odyssey Church in Tukwila, Washington. They got started last month. The Cove, you guys met EJ. He's preached here before. Some of you went out and helped with a service day at the Cove in Lakewood, just outside of Tacoma. Society Church in Portland, Oregon started in October, and then High Desert Christian Church in Jerome, Idaho. They actually all had their grand openings on October 5th, which made my life a little difficult because I couldn't be everywhere at once. But they were able to get started because of churches like you. You guys partner with Evergreen to help us establish churches. You've directly helped us with 2 specific churches. You helped us start one church in Seattle, and then here in October, the Cove Church in Lakewood. So on this weekend before Thanksgiving, can I just say thank you for investing and helping to start new churches? I want to say thank you and give you a hand for that. Now, some of you are here this morning, and you might be asking yourself, why do we need to start new churches? Because aren't there plenty of them around? And that's a good question. I actually get asked that question fairly often. So I thought it would take a few minutes this morning before I get to the message portion of what I have to share with you, to share with you why an organization like Evergreen helps to start new churches in the Pacific Northwest specifically, and why we need to across the United States, okay? To begin with, it's just basic math, okay? Population increase. Fundamentally, it's just basic math. The population in the United States is continuing to grow, as it is around the world. Anyone have any idea what the current U.S. population is at the moment? Say that again? 343, between 343 and 47 million. At the beginning of the year, I think it was like 335, so we've kind of grown throughout the year. So about 345 million people. That's roughly the population of the United States right now, as of the last census, okay? So take a look at this next graphic. This you can see 2023 when this graphic was kind of put together, and in 2023 the population was about 334. You see it's grown to 400. It's going to grow to 416 million people by 2060. That's nearly 100 million people in increase in over that period of time, over 40 years, and so that's a pretty sizable increase, and it's the basic reason we need to be establishing new churches moving forward. Are you with me? Another reason we need to start new churches is that there's been a pretty dramatic cultural shift in the United States with each generation over the last 70 years or so with the worldview. Check out this next graphic. You're likely familiar with these identifiers. Is there anybody here from the silent generation this morning? Raise your hand. Anybody? All right, give them a hand. Woohoo! Very good. Got a couple in first service too. How about boomers? We got any boomers in the room? Hey, boomer. All right, we got some boomers in the room. Where are the millennials at? Got some millennials. They're always the loudest in the room, typically, millennials. All right, Gen Z. Got any Gen Zers in the room? Woo! All right, there we go. How about Gen Alpha? Any alphas in the room? There was a couple last service. They're usually out in other parts of the building. And right now, some of you are really bristly because you know I skipped over a generation. And you're likely the generation that got skipped over. It's why you're bristly. It's Gen X. Any Gen Xers in the room? Woo! The truly loudest generation. The only problem with that, and I skipped over us on purpose to illustrate a point. We're the forgotten generation. Nobody pays attention to us. And we're not upset about that in any way, shape, or form, right? No, we're always skipped over. It's boomer to millennial all the time. But we're the ones fixing everything, people. Gen X is that's the glue that's holding this whole thing together, all right? So we can't be skipped over, all right? So Gen X is in the house. Let me hear Gen X one more time. See, they're the fixers. They're the ones making everything work, all right? Now, I want you to take a look at the shift that has occurred over the last 70 years. Go to this next graphic. The silent generation, that generation is about 77% of that population identifies as a Christian, has a Christian worldview. That includes all kinds of Christians, Catholics. It's all Christians, okay? And then as you go over, you see it's declined each generation until the current generation, Gen Z. 57% of Gen Z identifies as Christian. And that's the decline that's happened over the last 70 years or so. You can see, go ahead and put up the next slide there. Gen Z, you can see that lower three numbers there are those who don't identify with any religion at all, okay? That is atheists, agnostics, and this group we just referred to as the nuns. Not Catholic nuns, that'd be a lot of them. This is just people who don't identify with any religion at all, okay? Nuns. Now, they're not atheists and they're not agnostics, so they believe in some sort of a God, but they just don't identify with any particular religion, okay? About 36% is how that breaks down nationally. Go ahead and put up the next graphic. This is how it breaks down nationally. It's 36% on average across the United States is the percentage of the population that is just unaffiliated with any religion. You can see the two the two parts of the country where the most people who don't identify with any religion are the two corners, New England and the Northwest. And the populations in these 5 states, in these corners, is approaching 60%, 56, 57%. That's Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, New England. I used to live out that direction. And then Washington and Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. Probably not a shock to you. Seattle was actually just named the most irreligious city in America. Overtook San Francisco, and it's somewhere in the area of 68, 69% of the city of Seattle has no religious affiliation. So it's pretty staggering, okay? So that's kind of how that breaks down across the country, okay? Let me also point out an interesting stat about the unaffiliated population, this next graphic. Okay, so these are all of the people who don't identify with any religion, and is broken down between nothing in particular, agnostic, and atheist. The thing you need to know about atheists is that worldview doesn't grow. It never changes. Since we've been keeping data on this kind of thing, the atheist population in the US and globally has basically stayed the same. It's around 5%. Same is true as agnostics. The group that's been growing is the nothing in particular, the nones. So from 2008 to, in this graphic, 2022, it's gone up 14 to 23%. So it's continued to grow over time. It's continued to grow. But the thing that I am always looking at when I look at this is, again, the biggest bulk of that number do believe in some sort of God. They just aren't affiliated for one reason or another. And that gives me hope. But as a result of these shifts, churches have been closing their doors at a pretty alarming rate. This last year in 2025, 4,500 churches have closed their doors permanently. It's a lot of churches across the country. That number is anticipated to grow to at least 5,500 church closures per year over the next 30 years. A lot of churches shutting their doors in America. And it's anticipated that 176,000 churches will close permanently between this year and 2050. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you should probably be starting new churches. Unless that number alarm you, what you need to remind yourself is none of the churches the Apostle Paul started still exist. It's the handing off of the baton over the time. So you always need to be starting new churches. But that's why we start new churches. All of that kind of created this perfect storm, so to speak. You've got the population increasing. You've got this generational shift that has happened, different worldview, and church closures. And at first glance, that you could be tempted to think that's pretty insurmountable. But what if we chose to see these shifts as opportunities instead of crises? And here's the reason why I say that. As a follower of Jesus, we know that not even the gates of hell will prevail against Christ's church. We know that because Jesus said that to be true. Jesus said that to be true. Internationally, the church has been growing like crazy in Asia, in Africa, and South America, usually among oppressed people groups. Where Christianity struggles is among the wealthy. And in the United States, we're the wealthiest country in the world. And one of the reasons we struggle is because when you have a lot of wealth, you don't identify that there's a need. You don't need a God. You can kind of control things yourself. At least that's the illusion. And that's part of the problem in our world, in our country in particular. Why there's been a decline over time is because we continue to be a wealthy nation. And that poses a challenge. But even in the U.S., we know that the church is still God's plan for reaching and discipling the world for Jesus. That is why we need to be diligent in starting new expressions of the church all over the country, but specifically here in the Pacific Northwest. Excuse me. Excuse me. There's no effective effort that's greater in reaching the unaffiliated population through starting new churches. Here's an interesting statistic here. The average new church, the congregation is made up of 42% of people who weren't going to church anywhere before that new church started. So that's pretty staggering. It's a lot of people who come to new churches, and a lot of reasons for that we don't have time to go into today. But new churches have a better ability to connect with people who aren't going to church than churches that are more established. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. It's just statistically how that works. We also know this through experience. This is what the late Tim Keller once said about church planting. I love Tim Keller. This is something that he wrote that has really stood out to me over the last 30 years. He wrote, "The vigorous, continual planting of new congregations is the single most crucial strategy for the numerical growth of the body of Christ in a city and the continual corporate renewal and revival of the existing churches in a city. Nothing else, not crusades, outreach programs, parachurch ministries, growing megachurches, congregational consulting, nor church renewal processes will have the consistent impact of dynamic, extensive church planting." And I couldn't agree with him more. Now, all that I've shared so far is why we are so passionate about starting new churches. It's also why Lake Sawyer is helping us to start new churches in this region. And again, thank you for that. It's actually a big deal that you participate in helping to establish new churches, because the sad reality is that the average church in America is simply not reproducing themselves. Only 7% of churches help to start new churches. That's a pathetic number. Only 7% of churches. And so Lake Sawyer needs to be commended. It's how the church is supposed to work. So thank you for that. Now that stat is really just a macro view of a greater problem, a more individual problem. And that is the failure of most followers of Jesus to ever lead another person to Jesus. And while churches are not multiplying in America, listen to me, followers of Jesus are not multiplying ourselves either. There's probably a correlation in that, do you think? We are simply not sharing our faith with others and inviting them to join this journey of faith with us. We are not, as followers of Jesus, making disciples. And so with that, let me transition this morning from talking about establishing churches to making disciples. I'm going to make it a little more personal to you. Let me start with this question. I like to ask questions. There'll be several. Here's the first one. Who is it that you're investing your life in? Who are you investing your life in right now? Who are you inviting into your life that God has created inside of you? If you have a Bible this morning, I want you to look up Matthew chapter 28. That's where we're going to be this morning. If you have a Bible app, you can look it up there. But while you're looking that up, let me share with you a little story. It's a story about the transportation system in London, England. Okay? There was a problem with basically the bus system in London where people would go out to their bus stop and they would get ready to, catch the bus, and the bus would just drive on by and wouldn't stop, obviously causing problems. You're going to be late for work because the bus didn't pick you up. That's an issue. And so people started to get really angry and frustrated. They started sending in letters to the transit authority in London complaining about the issues. And the transit authority put out a press release to try to explain what was going on and calm everybody down. And their response has become infamous in public relations courses all over the world. Because this is the response from the transit authority. This is their actual response to everybody who had a problem with the bus not stopping and picking them up. Here's what they wrote in part. I quote, "It is impossible for us to maintain our schedule if we are constantly having to stop and pick up passengers." You're the bus. Now, it was a bigger statement than that, but that was the crux of it. And here's the deal. Someone in the London Transit Authority forgot why they existed. It wasn't to maintain a schedule. It was to pick up people and take them to where they need to go, right? That is their mission, and they forgot what their mission was. And as followers of Jesus, friends, we have been given a pretty clear mission. A command, actually, from Jesus that he wanted us to stay focused on, laser focused. One thing he didn't want us to forget. And this is where it's recorded. Matthew 28, verse 18 through 20. Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always, until the very end of the age." And so Jesus, before he leaves earth, he gathers all of his disciples together and he says, okay, here's what I want you to do, okay? Single primary focus. I want you to go and I want you to make disciples. It's a command actually given by Jesus himself. A command. It's not just, a simple, toss out phrase. It was the last thing he thought he needed to remind his followers. Because we have a tendency to forget and do a mission drift, don't we? Why are we here? What is our purpose? It's not just what we do in here in a gathering like this. It's what we're doing out there that really is important. Go and make disciples. And the tool that God has given us to make disciples with is pretty clear. It's supposed to be love. If you've read the New Testament, you know that to be true. If you've visited the life of Jesus in Scripture, you know that to be true. The world will be drawn to you, the Bible says, and the life that God is creating in you by your love for the Father and your love for who? One another. Jesus said that too. Everywhere that Jesus went, he set out one of these. I'm a prop comic this morning. I'm the carrot top of pastors. That's a joke that will only apply to Gen X and above, because nobody knows who I'm talking about when I say carrot top. Okay, you got welcome. Got to welcome Matt. Everywhere that Jesus went in his life, he set out one of these. Whether he was going to a well, walking through a town, meeting with a group of people, meeting with someone who had just been stoned for their sins. Wherever Jesus went, Jesus plopped down one of these right in front of him because he wanted everyone to know that everyone he ever encountered was welcome in his presence. Everyone he ever encountered was welcome in his presence. Everywhere he went. It's imperative. Jesus wanted everyone to understand that every human being on this planet is invited to be adopted into Christ's family. Every single one. Every single one. Jesus actually sent out an invitation 2,000 years ago. And on this invitation, Jesus stamped an image. And the image has stayed with us. It's a picture that says that you are loved. It's a picture that says there's no limitations to what God is willing to do for you. It's an invitation that says friendship with God is actually possible because of sacrifice. It's a picture that communicates that nothing can change the love the Father has for you, not even death itself. But sadly, Christians in churches over the years, many have taken the image of the cross and replaced it with a different kind of image. An image that tells people of the world to go away. The same people that the Father wants to adopt into his family. And there are a lot of people who say, you're not welcome. Get away from here, stay away. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth of what Jesus wants to be communicated to our world. And so when Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, where does that start? Sure, it includes starting new churches, but where does that start collectively, individually? Because it's a huge task to make disciples of all nations. It's a simple idea, but it's an enormous task. Well, it starts with each one of us. It starts with each one of us. Here's the first question, or the next question that I have that you've got to be able to answer if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're ever going to make a disciple. Is there a welcome mat at the entrance of your heart? Is there a welcome mat at the entrance of your heart? You see, you can't make a disciple if you don't love people. And friends, there are a lot of people in our world that claim to represent Jesus that don't sound much like they love anybody. Let's be honest. You know, the ones with the bullhorn standing at the public event, screaming at everybody. Even if what they're saying is true, their methods are not helping anybody. It's not effective. Is there a welcome mat at the entrance of your heart? Do you actually love people? It actually all comes down to how you treat the people that Jesus died for. And here's how you know if you're really a follower of Jesus. When you meet people and are around people who may not look like or act like you, do you want to serve them or do you want to compete with them? Do you want to build them up or do you want to tear them down? Do you want to give them something or do you want to get something from them? Do you want to help them or do you want to mock them? See, when Jesus takes up residence in your life, he expands your capacity to love, even people you consider enemies. Jesus said that. He adds square footage to your heart by renovating and ripping out all of the lies and condemnation you ever believed about yourself. Did that happen for you? But in addition, he also wants to rip out all the lies and condemnation you might believe about other people. And what Jesus wants to replace with all those lies and that condemnation is something called grace and truth. Grace and truth. And the closer you become to Jesus, the more grace and truth just start seeping out of every pore of your life and every conversation that you have. Is that true for you? And I want you to understand, truth has never been more difficult for people to discern than it is right now. It is really difficult for people to figure out what is true and what is not true. It's really difficult. And friends, we actually have a relationship with the personification of truth itself, Jesus. Jesus said he is the truth, right? We also know he said that the truth will set you what? Free. Friends, we need to be about truth. But hear me, grace and truth always comes in that order. Because you're not really usually able to hear truth until you first experienced God's grace. Am I right? Jesus looked for ways to build people up. He served them and he loved them. I don't know about you, but when I became a follower of Jesus, I didn't want to hear anybody's truth because I didn't think anybody cared about me. It wasn't until I experienced his grace that I wanted to listen to his truth. Romans tells us it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And that is how we need to be as followers of Jesus. And the reason people wanted to be around Jesus was because he put out a welcome mat that says, you're welcome in my presence. And true followers of Jesus should put out a welcome mat as well. Because we know what it means to need grace to be able to understand God's truth, right? That's been true for me. So again, who is it that you're investing your life in right now? Who is it for you? Who's coming to mind? Do people in your life who are outside the church feel like there's a welcome mat in front of you? There needs to be a welcome mat at the entrance of your heart. Here's my next question. Is there a welcome mat at the entrance of your home? Is there a welcome mat at the entrance of your home? Probably you got one sitting out there, people wipe their feet on. That's not what I'm talking about. You know, most people that we know in our culture today, people that would describe themselves as disconnected, unaffiliated, they're unaffiliated because they've been wounded, they're angry and confused. They're religiously unconnected. And they're often that way because of their family. Their family hurt them in some way or betrayed them or confused them in some way. That's the bulk of the people who would fall into that category. Was that ever true for you before you took a step in? And so the healing that God wants to do in people's lives needs to happen in the context of another family because the one they've been in has really traumatized them in one way, shape, or form. The good news is Psalm 68 says God sets the lonely in families, different families. I didn't grow up going to church, ever. Not a day in my life except for when I was an infant. I was baptized, but I don't remember that. I didn't go to church another day in my life. My dad was a non-practicing Catholic, an unaffiliated Catholic. He'd fall into that category. We didn't talk about that. My mom was an unaffiliated Baptist. We didn't talk about that. My dad was also an alcoholic. And we certainly didn't talk about that. And so for me growing up, Life could be kind of difficult at home. It could be challenging. And just to be frank with you, I didn't want to be home very often. And I looked for every opportunity in the world to be somewhere else. I had a friend who lived down the road from me. I grew up in Aurora, Colorado. And as a young teenager, 12, 13 years old, I met him and started hanging out with him. Hanging out at his house. We'd trade baseball cards together, play football in his front yard. We'd do everything together. We had a lot of fun together. And sometimes he would invite me to stay the night at his house or come over for dinner. I used to be really intrigued to eat dinner with them because they did something weird. Every time they ate, they prayed. It was weird. Also kind of cool. Because for the first time in my life, I experienced adults asking me questions about myself, asking what they could pray about, what I might be struggling with. And for the first time, they showed me some attention. They also knew through my friend things that were going well. If something good happened at school, he'd tell them, and they would say something to me when I was eating dinner with them. And that just filled me up, I'll tell you that. I loved going over there. One evening, they asked me, or I asked, they asked if I wanted to spend the night, and if I did, that the next day they were going to church. And that was the first time that ever happened. I never spent the night there on a Saturday night, but this time I spent the night and I went to church. When they asked me, do you want to go to church with us? I had all kinds of thoughts. I'm telling you, when I say I never went to church, I had no idea. I was like, do I have the right clothes to go to church? I don't know. They're like, you'll be fine. Are there going to be snakes there? I didn't know what was happening. I had no idea. But I showed up. And what I experienced there was a whole lot of other families, just like the family of my friend. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen and I felt whole because I started to experience grace and truth. I started to experience who this Jesus was. And as a result, I took a step towards Jesus. And I was baptized when I was 17 years old and became a follower of Jesus. All because a family invited me over to spend time with them. That family had no idea the ripple effect that they were going to have on my life. They had no idea that I'd one day become a pastor. They had no idea that one day I would baptize my mom and my dad into Jesus. They had no idea that I would become a pastor and be standing here in the Seattle area 40 years later talking to you about grace and truth and the importance of loving people and creating disciples. They had no idea that my daughter would be doing the same in Ventura, California, sharing her faith with hundreds of kids. And no idea that my son and my daughter-in-law would be in Japan having started a church. And in a culture where less than 1% of the population even knows who Jesus is, baptized 3 people last Sunday who may not be followers of Jesus today. Had that family not invited me over to dinner and prayed for me and cared for me. Friends, what would happen? What would happen if every person in your neighborhood, wherever you live, what if all of them were invited to dinner at someone's house who's associated with God's family? What if they all just came and had a meal with a safe person? And in experiencing your love for them, they experienced the Father's love for them. Who is it right now that's coming to your mind? Don't let it drift away. I want you to take a look at one last statistic. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. One more. Take a look at this graphic. This shows the population over the last 2,000 years. You see, at the time of Jesus, the population was about 200 to 250 million people. That's the estimate. The world population, less than the population of the United States currently. But over time, it kind of stayed the same, you'll see, because, modern medicine didn't exist, and people would have kids they wouldn't survive. People would die early, so the population never really grew. And over time, you see the big increase. What you're seeing right there is the advent of modern medicine. Boom, spiked up there. Current population of the globe is 8.1 billion people. That is a lot of people. But when Jesus was walking this earth with around 250, 300 million people, Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. If plentiful and few were the words Jesus used in his day and age, what word would he use today with 8.1 billion people on this planet? With such a massively growing population, what the world needs more than anything, certainly more than information. Friends, we have more information than we've ever had in the history of the world. You have information at the tip of your fingertip. You can look up any fact, any stat, anything you need to know. We have more information than has ever been available to humankind. But what the world needs more than anything is the tangible love of Jesus Christ. And the more AI is prevalent, the less people will experience that. We don't need more information. We need love. We need someone to reach out and show that they care, to pay attention to what's going on in our lives. Every single one of us, we need the tangible love of Jesus. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Friends, I've pastored churches. I've been a pastor for a long time. And the worst thing that can happen to any church is a slow mission drift into believing that everything you do is about you and you alone. You know, the entire reason that this church exists, the entire reason we start new churches, the entire reason the capital C church exists in this world is for people who are not yet members. Think about that. It is our mission. It's why we're still here. Otherwise, we'd just be called up and be in heaven. There'd be no reason to be here. We're here to increase the population of heaven. Don't allow the gravitational pull that every church battles to allow you to become inwardly focused. I know Mike, and I know his heart for people who don't know Jesus. I've met enough of you to know your heart. I know there's a welcome mat at the front door of this church. Don't ever allow that to change. Don't ever allow that to change. It's who you are. Don't forget your job description. Make disciples. And here's the truth. There are more people willing to hear the message of Jesus right now than there are willing to share the message of Jesus. I think that's what Jesus meant when he said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And it all begins when one of you in Black Diamond chooses to love a neighbor and makes them a meal because they had a baby or because they lost a loved one. It's when another one of you helps to buy a single mom groceries. It's someone offering to mow the lawn of an elderly person. It's someone to offer to pray with a friend with their permission who was just told they have cancer. It's offering to open your home, to have people over, to spend time with people, investing in them. And each of those tangible, real-life acts of love is what it really means to make disciples. It's not as complicated as we make it. In fact, when Jesus said go, that actually translates as you are going. As you are going to soccer, as you're going to yoga, as you're going to the stores, you're going to work, as you're going to a party, make disciples. Friends, it's not about reciting the book of Ecclesiastes to someone. Again, they have information. They need the tangible love of Jesus that shows that you actually care about them. You know what? I know that Mike shared with you a statistic about this generation, Gen Z, and how they're showing more interest now than they have for the younger generation for the last 70 years. And it's all about this. They are drunk on information. They have all kinds of stuff thrown at them. What they're starving for is tangible love of Jesus. What our area needs more than anything is for this church to live out your calling, to serve people and invite people into your homes, to care for people. So friends, let me just encourage you. You need a welcome mat. Don't let it go away. The entrance of your heart. It needs to be at your home, it needs to be at this church, but it needs to be here. You can't make disciples if you don't love people. Love people. You'll make an impact for generations if you do. love your neighbor, and you'll make disciples. The need has never been more greater than it is right now. Can I pray for you? Heavenly Father, I'm so thankful for the grace and truth of Jesus. God, we live in a society that's really confused by what is true. There's so much information that it's overwhelming. What do I believe? What is there? What direction do I go? And I know this to be true in my life, and I'm sure if we all just think about it, it's true for each one of us. The only reason we know what's true is when someone steps forward and without any reason in the world other than that they care about you, you experience it. This world is all about transactions. So what can we get from someone? Man, what a countercultural life it is to serve other people, to love people unconditionally, to invite them into your home, give them a meal, care for them, no strings attached. Nothing is more powerful than the grace and love and truth of Jesus. I pray that every person in this room does not forget that. I pray that we don't forget what our calling is. We don't become like the London Transit Authority and forget what our mission is. It's not about our busy schedules. It's about people. Thank you for modeling that, Lord. Thank you for giving us a picture of what we're supposed to do in this life, and that's the person of Jesus. Help us to live like him sacrificially, and in so doing, multiply ourselves. It's in Jesus' that we pray today.